Hi and welcome or welcome back to the Books Are Everywhere. So today I'm here with my January wrap up. I can't believe we're already a month into the year. January's already gone. It did feel like a long month, but it also feels like it's gone very quickly as well. So it's strange, but I'm glad we got through January. The start of the month I did find a little bit difficult on my mental health. I was struggling with the prospect of going into a new year and a lot is happening this year. But we've gotten through January, we're in February, got some exciting things happening in February, so very much looking forward to being in a new month and a new reading month as well. But anyway, I read 10 books in January, which although it's not as much as I would have liked to have read, I still feel like I did a good job considering a lot of these are quite chunky books as well. And I completed the an entire series, so I'm pretty proud of myself for what I did read. Hoping to read a little bit more in February, although it is a shorter month, so we will see how that goes, but I have some shorter books on my TBR for February as well. If you want to see my February TBR, my mini golf TBR is up now as well, and I will link that down below if I remember. But I did manage to read all of the books on my January mini golf TBR, so I'm pretty happy with that. But anyway, let's dive in with what I read in January. So the first book I read at the start of the year was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is a gothic horror romance, and I honestly really enjoyed this. I'd been recommended this one because it is kind of similar to Jane Eyre, and honestly I can kind of see the writing style and the idea of it, especially behind the romance. I can see where that's kind of coming from, and I honestly really enjoyed this. It was a very slow start to my reading year because it did take me, I think, like 10 days to get through this, so it was a slow start. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars because I did find the pacing a little bit off for the first half of the book, and then I kind of flew through the second half. So it didn't quite reach a 5-star because of that, but it was very close to it. And this one follows an unnamed woman. We never know who she is other than Mrs. De Winter. And she is basically the kind of like assistant, she's like a paid friend of this woman who's travelling, and on her travels she ends up meeting Max de Winter, who is the owner of this estate, and he's also a widower. So they get married and they go back to the estate, and the woman who Max was married to before who passed away is called Rebecca. And as Mrs. De Winter kind of lives in Manderley, where Max de Winter is from, more and more she finds out more about Rebecca, and there's kind of like a mystery surrounding her, so she's kind of shrouded in mystery. And that is kind of where this book goes, and I really liked it, really liked the writing, really liked the atmosphere. It's a very atmospheric book, and as I said, the pacing definitely picked up in the second half of the book as well. So if you are into gothic, kind of Victorian style, gothic horror literature, I would definitely recommend this one. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, first read of the year, I gave 4.5 stars. I am sad to say that I didn't rate a book 5 stars in January. I just didn't really get there with any of these books that I read, but I definitely got very close to it. And next is a series I'm going to talk about all in one go, and that is the Dark Shade of Magic series by V. Schwab, which I read the whole of in January, which I'm very proud of, especially as some of these, especially the last one, is very thick. And I think I gave all of these 4 stars. I think I might have given A Conjuring of Light 4.5, which is the last one, and then the other 2 I gave 4 stars, I believe. Yeah. So I buddy read all of these with Alex over a couple of weeks, and I honestly really enjoyed this series. It just didn't quite make a 5-star for me because I wanted to have more of an emotional connection to the characters than I did. I'm going to put those 2 books down because it's very heavy to hold and awkward to hold, but yeah, this is the first one. And basically this follows Cal and Lila. Cal is a magician, he has kind of magical powers, and he travels between these different Londons. So there's 4 different Londons, there's red, white, black and grey, I think. And he can travel between them. I imagine them as like layers in a world, so they never interact with each other than the fact that Kel and a few other magicians can travel between them. And on these travels he meets Lila Bard, who is a thief. I would say she's an assassin, she's kind of an assassin. But they kind of become friends and go on this kind of adventure together, and this story is told between kind of both of their points of view, although it is told in third person, so it also incorporates a lot of other points of view in there as well, as they're kind of together and apart throughout this story. I really like this because I feel like each book definitely has like a different plot, which I really liked. I feel like it kept it really interesting. So yeah, the first one kind of follows them kind of meeting and discovering these different Londons together, and something very big happens. And then the second one goes on to this kind of like game, and then the third one carries on kind of more from that side of the story. But yeah, I really enjoyed this series. I think I just wanted a little bit more of an emotional connection with the characters, and I kept thinking like, I think it's because it's third person that I'm not getting this connection. And then I just kept thinking, but Six of Crows is third person, and I definitely cry at that. Like, I just wanted to cry. Like, really emotional things are happening, and I just wasn't feeling it as much as I wanted to, and that is why I haven't rated any of these 5 stars. But it was, again, very, very close to it, and I would highly recommend this series. It was very interesting, very fast paced despite the size of the books, and I couldn't put it down. I really, really enjoyed it. Also really liked the audiobook for the second and third ones because the narrators changed and it had multiple narrators, which definitely really, really helped. So I would recommend the audiobooks. But yeah, really enjoyed it, just not quite 5 stars. And then we have another 4.5 star read, and that was Messy Brutes by Laura Gall, and this is a proof copy that was sent to me by Harper 360, so thank you to Harper. And this one actually comes out, I think, in February, but it might be in March in the UK. So I think, yeah, the date on here is the 15th of Feb, but I think it's early March in the UK, but I might be wrong. This is a graphic novel memoir of a Wuhanese American, and I absolutely love this. It was so good, and I honestly, maybe I should have rated this 5 stars because it was so close to it as well. So it will be in full colour when it's printed, and this is what it will look like inside. And most of the copy that I have is black and white, and I still really, really enjoyed reading it, but I'm very excited to see what the finished copy looks like because the start little sample they gave us, which I'm really happy it has in it because the colours in this are absolutely beautiful. I get the impression it's going to be yellows, oranges, and kind of dark browns, and that's what it looks like throughout the start of the story, which I really loved. But yeah, this basically follows Laura, so it is a memoir from her point of view as a Chinese immigrant in America. So it kind of follows her growing up, going to college, all of those things, but then it also kind of introduces COVID-19 and the fact obviously she's from Wuhan. So it talks about what she kind of faced during the pandemic and is facing during the pandemic. But I also just really liked the way that this was told in terms of talking about Wuhan and not talking about it in relation to COVID. Like, it's an actual place that people live and people love. And I just really like the fact that it just talks about this rich culture of the city without mentioning the fact that this is where COVID originated, or COVID was first found. So I just really like that kind of side of it, and I think it was really beautifully told. But yeah, I gave this one 4.5 stars. As I said, I maybe should have given this 5. I feel like I'm really withholding my 5-star ratings this year, but it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing it in full colour because the art style is great, but the colour really brings it out. I then picked up You and Me at the End of the World by Brianna Bourne, and this is a post-apocalyptic book where 2 people wake up in the world and there is nobody else around. So it follows Hannah and Leo. Hannah is kind of a quiet girl, she's very into ballet, and she wakes up and she's in this world on her own. She doesn't think anyone else exists in this world, and then she comes across Leo, who she kind of knows through school but not really very close to at all. It's more like seeing across the hall and stuff, and he is a hot boy band boy who plays guitar, and they bump into each other in a bookstore that's next to a music store, and they realise that they're not alone in the world, there is 2 of them, and it kind of goes from there, and they're in this barren landscape and they discover more things about the world. So they are like in where they lived in real life, but nobody else is there and they don't know where anyone's gone. So very, very interesting. I liked the way that this went in terms of the story. I was a bit nervous about where it could go in terms of like why they were in this post-apocalyptic world, but I feel like what the author did there I was quite happy with. I quite liked where it went, but these characters, as you can probably tell, were very, very cliche. It was a very easy read because of that, but I just couldn't get over the characters and some of the really cringy things that were said in this book. And some of them were a little bit like, oh, really? You're gonna say that? And because of that, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was enjoyable, it was good, but it was nothing special in my opinion. I do love this cover though. I then picked up the Monsters of Rockhaven, which is a middle grade book, and it kind of reminded me of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. House for Peculiar Children? Home for Peculiar Children, but for slightly younger readers. And I really enjoyed this. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars because it didn't like blow me away, but I did really enjoy reading it. It follows Mirabelle, who lives in this house, and she is one of the monsters of Rockhaven. The monsters are kind of like a family, and they all have this kind of thing about them that makes them different, and they all live together in this house called Rockhaven. And then there is these two children, these two orphans, who accidentally find their way into Rockhaven and they're not supposed to be there. So it kind of follows them throughout their journey together, finding out more about each other and realising that they might be able to be friends, even though there is a lot of differences between them. And also talks a lot about how the monsters are kind of exiled from the land because of who they are, which I thought was really interesting. And it's also illustrated, and I think the illustrations definitely elevated this book a lot. I really, really liked some of the illustrations are absolutely beautiful. This one of my favourites. When the new part started, there was like a full 2-page thread, and they are really, really stunning. So yeah, I did enjoy this one, but as I said, it didn't really blow me away. It's not a new favourite, so I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I then read This Woven Kingdom by Tahara Mafi, and this one comes out in a couple of days. It comes out on the 3rd of February. And I received this as a proof copy, so thank you very much to the publishing company for sending my shop a copy of this book, which I then took because I did want to read it. But I have very mixed opinions of not only this book, but Tahara Mafi's work in general. Shatter Me was a very hit and miss series for me. I only read a couple of the books and then just kind of fell off because I didn't really enjoy them that much. And I absolutely loved A Very Large Expanse of Sea. That is one of my favourite books. So I have very mixed opinions, but I saw that this one was blurbed by Cassandra Clare, Stephanie Garber, Renee Dyer, and it says it's perfect for fans of Leigh Bardugo, Sabaa Tahir. So I thought I'd pick this up because it sounded very intriguing, but it was very, very hit and miss for me as well. So this one follows Eliza, who is hiding. She is like the heir to a Jin kingdom, but she's hiding as a servant. And it also follows Cameron, who is the crown prince. And their worlds kind of like collide. And I don't know, there was some stuff I liked about this book, but thinking back on it, there was a lot that I didn't like as well. The insta-romance, for sure, I found very hit and miss. I feel like I didn't really understand where their attraction was coming from. I feel like they didn't know each other very well. This is definitely a fantasy romance and kind of has a lot of pining. And I just didn't really understand like where the connection had come from, other than this kind of like sense of intrigue maybe, because they really didn't know each other. And I also found the writing very off. I feel like it felt like Tahara Mafi was trying to do something with this, and trying to write in a certain style, but it shows that she's trying. Does that make sense? It just doesn't feel very natural. It's almost like she's trying to write something that is more highbrow, more elevated than Shatter Me, and it kind of shows in her writing that she's like trying to do that. Some of the sentences just felt very convoluted, and they felt very long. They didn't really make sense. I'd have to read them through a couple of times for it to make sense. However, I did get used to it. Like, I did get used to the writing. I read like 400 pages of this book in one day, because I did really get used to it. It's very easy to read, very easy to get through. The chapters are quite short, so I did find this one quite compelling. So there was stuff that I liked about it. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I also really liked the magic system, and I really liked the world building, and I think that's what really stood out to me, and what I loved about this book was that side of things. So it did get a mixed review from me, but 3.5 stars overall. I honestly feel like I just started January with like all over the place. A lot of these books got really mixed reviews from me, because there is another one in it that like caused some controversy that I also had very mixed opinions of. But anyway, I then read More Than This by Patrick Ness. And I read this in a couple of days. I read the majority of this, so like 375 pages in an afternoon, and I actually really enjoyed this. This is another post-apocalyptic book, and it follows Seth, who drowns and he wakes up in this world that is actually where he lived as a child. So he'd when he died, he was in America, where he'd moved to, and as a child he lived in London in the UK, and he wakes up basically where he was as a child, and the world is completely the same. Like, he wakes up in his house as it was when he was a child, and he is on his own in this barren landscape, and it feels like nobody has been there in years. There is no hint of other people, and the story kind of goes from there. And this is very interesting. It's told partly in flashbacks, partly in, well, mostly in the fact that Seth is in this world completely alone. And I just felt it was really well written, really enjoyable. It kind of is a little bit predictable in terms of it being a post-apocalyptic dystopian book, and I did have mixed opinions about the ending and wasn't quite sure how I felt about the ending. I honestly couldn't tell you what I wanted the ending to be, so I feel like I can't really judge it too harshly. I don't know what I wanted, but yeah, it's a very odd thing that I read this and You and Me at the End of the World in 1 month, because I don't read a lot of this kind of thing, and with both of them I was kind of reading them and going like, I really don't know where this is going to end, and I don't know how I want it to end, and they went in very, very different ways. I thought they might go in the same kind of way for a while, and then they actually ended up having very different endings. But yeah, I enjoyed this one a lot more than I expected. It's been on my TBR for a very, very long time. I've been very daunted and intimidated by it, and I don't really know why, because as I said, I read most of this in an afternoon. It was a very easy read, and I really enjoyed it, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And then the last book, which is the one that I think I'm going to cause some controversy with, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. So I finally read this one after picking it out of my TBR jar as part of my TBR game for January, and I'm glad I did, because I just feel like I would have never read this otherwise, because I just didn't want to. Like, I do, obviously. I did want to, I bought it, and I was very intrigued by this. But also, it's just, I think I need to accept that Greek mythofiction just might not be for me, or at least maybe not in this way. I've read Circe and this one by Madeline Miller now, and I did enjoy this one more. Circe was very, very difficult to get through for me. I found it very literary, but I can see why it's so well loved. And it's the same with this one, although the writing is completely different. This was very easy to get into. I can see why this is the one that a lot of people read and a lot of people pick up, even though they might not be readers day to day. But I just have such mixed opinions about it, because I feel like this one starts off exactly what I wanted it to be, and it was actually very different to how I expected, because I kind of expected it to be down the more literary route like Circe, and it ended up being this more like slice of life romance between Patroclus and Achilles, which I actually really, really enjoyed. And then as we go further and further into the book, we end up approaching the Battle of Troy, and it kind of just goes down this like political warfare route, and yes, we still do get this slice of life from Patroclus's point of view, but it was more also about the war and about the political warfare, which I just really wasn't into, and I just felt it got very kind of like dry, and there was a lot of names thrown in that I just didn't know, because I do not know a lot about Greek mythology, and I just kind of lost it from there, and I didn't cry, and I was fully expecting for this to break me, and I just didn't really feel anything. I don't know, I feel like this wrap up is just kind of revealing me as like not feeling anything for books. Like, I just don't cry at books anymore, which scares me because I do cry at books. But this one just didn't get me in the way that I expected it to, and I think obviously there is a lot of hype for this book, so no doubt, like, if it doesn't live up to that hype, I am going to be disappointed, and that is sadly kind of what happened here. So I'm giving it 3.5 stars. I did still enjoy it, and there was a big chunk of it at the start where I was like, yeah, I can see this being 5 stars, I can see why people really, really love it, and then it just slowly kind of went downhill from there. But 3.5 stars. Song of Achilles. But it's one I would like to keep and reread in the future, because I feel like it's one that my opinion could change on. So yeah, I don't know. I will probably reread it in the future. And then before I go, I just want to mention The Poppy War, which is the book I am currently reading. I'm this far through, so this will end up in my February wrap-up, but I'm really enjoying this one so far. When I first started this, I was like, this is going to be the 5-star read. However, again, it's also kind of lost me and it's gone into like a political warfare route, which I'm not enjoying so much, but the first like 150 pages of this were amazing and definitely a 5 stars from me. And this one is really interesting. It follows Rin, who is kind of like a peasant girl from the south, and she is going to be forced into a marriage that she doesn't want to be forced into, she doesn't want to marry. So to get away from that, she ends up sitting this kind of entrance exam, which is it's more kind of aimed at noble children and not a lot of people from where she's from in her kind of social standing sit this exam, and she ends up actually doing really well and going on to this kind of magic academy in the north, and the story kind of follows from there, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And now we've kind of already passed that and I've gone into this like political warfare, but still really enjoying it, so I will talk to you about that in my February wrap up when I do that one. So anyway, that is the end of my January wrap up. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let me know what you read in January, and I will see you soon with another video. Bye!